I'm very enthused that vaccines, all the standby capacity that we will have on for the next pandemic, we may be able to use that when there's not a pandemic going on to create lots of low-cost supply capacity for the entire world. And imagine that you'd had a vaccine, back in the summer, you would have saved millions of lives.
COVID-19 has already changed the vaccine market, potentially irreversibly.
I do think that women could make politics irrelevant by a kind of spontaneous cooperative action, the like of which we have never seen, which is so far from people's ideas of state structure and viable social structure that seems to them like total anarchy. And what it really is very subtle forms of interrelation which do not follow a sort of hierarchical pattern, which is fundamentally patriarchal. The opposite to patriarchy is not matriarchy, but fraternity. And I think it's women who are going to have to break the spiral of power and find the trick of cooperation.
Why do I call him today's Columbus? Because he's carving out new colonies. So he's taking all the failed projects with the wrong thinking that life is like a word program and can be chopped and cut and pasted when it's an amazing complexity of self-organization. And scientists call it autopoiesis, self-organization, writing your own poetry.
There is a broad coalition of people who want to waive patents on COVID-19 vaccines. This map, it's showing you the different positions which there are across the globe when it comes to vaccine patents. So here you see in yellow countries who have come together to say there should be no patents on COVID-19 vaccines so that anyone can get the recipe and anyone can produce the vaccine. Do you think it would be helpful for the vaccine recipes to be shared?
No.
Why not?
Well, there's only so many vaccine factories in the world, and people are very serious about the safety of vaccines. And so moving something that had never been done, moving a vaccine from, say, a J&J factory into a factory in India, that it's novel. It's only because of our grants and our expertise that can happen at all.
Our cover story tonight is about a doctor in Wuhan. You've probably not heard of her because her story has been hidden by the mighty dragon. Hidden until it got out. We are talking about Dr. Ai Fen. She's the director of the emergency department at the Wuhan Central Hospital. She's also the reason why the world found out about China's cover-up. She was perhaps the first doctor to order tests on the early coronavirus patients. And now she has gone missing.
It remains Australia's firm view that understanding the cause of this pandemic has nothing to do with politics. It's essential for preventing the next one. And I strongly support President Biden's recent statement that we need to bolster and accelerate efforts to identify the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think China has to start to act more responsibly in terms of international norms on human rights and transparency. Transparency matters across the board. We don't know, we haven't had access to the laboratories to determine whether or not, I have not reached a conclusion because our intelligence community is not certain yet.
So I think that in the short term, in the midterm, knowing is kind of irrelevant because we know what we need to do. Right now, we have to vaccinate as much of the world as possible, as quickly as possible.
Now more than ever, we need news we can trust. We are seeing media businesses collapsing. We are seeing attacks on media freedom, and we are seeing journalists being threatened, both off and online. We see an avalanche of mis- and disinformation, of fake news spreading fast.
The Wuhan Institute of Virology is the lab under investigation examining whether an accidental leak may have started the global pandemic.
Even some frontline workers like this young nurse are hesitant about receiving their second Astra dose and want Pfizer instead.
For the fact that less people are having reactions to the Pfizer, and especially for young healthcare professionals, which there are so many of us.
You should continue for the vaccine that you have initially been provided.
There is no international process for investigating the origins of the pandemic. But there are two major hypotheses. The other one is the accidental lab incident.
President Trump weaponized this subject and made the very questioning of the origins of the virus radioactive for a lot of people.
There was so little space, even for Democrats, even for progressives, to ask the questions.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. You could hardly speak about that without kind of alluding to change and transformation, you know, occurring. And I think, you know, in periods of homeostasis, you can have hierarchies, you know, for longer than you normally would be able to have them. And they seem stable and they seem productive, but they're only productive when you don't have to pivot, you don't have to move, you don't have to change. But if you have a culture that's lasting longer, then that's a culture that's constantly in flux. It's worth looking, I guess, at cultures that have done this successfully, and that have had leadership models and decision-making models that are more agile, more distributed. In this society right now, people need to understand more what it is to have a voice. Yeah. I think a lot of people feel voiceless and unheard unless their narrative is coming out on top. If their narrative doesn't become dominant and the loudest and one in the room that everyone agrees with, then they feel like they're not being heard. So everybody wants to win with their voice and for their voice to drown out everybody else's, and they feel like they don't have a voice unless their voice is the top voice.
I want to find out what anti-vaxxers believe, or more importantly, what they don't believe. Why are they so resistant to the overwhelming scientific evidence that vaccines are safe?
I will absolutely refuse to take a coronavirus vaccine.
They're going to be dropping actual uncensored facts on how you beat the virus, including all future mutations.
What does it take to know for sure where it did come from?
There's kind of these three competing theories. Was it naturally occurring from animals and then spreading naturally? Was it naturally occurring zoonotic, from animals, then captured, harvested, studied, and accidentally released? Or were they tinkering with it for scientific purposes, but in a controversial way, and then let this gain of function research, and then let it out?
This theory about the lab, the theory that a virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan, was once very much on the fringe of science, but it's now, certainly in the US, being seen as a mainstream possible explanation for the pandemic.
How I see that is not that it sort of moved from the fringes into the mainstream. I feel like it was initially quashed and denied, primarily because it positioned science awkwardly. If sciences and progress are the solution to all of our problems, then it's important that pharmaceutical companies and science more generally can be presented as the solution to the problem of coronavirus. If science caused coronavirus by gain of function experimentation, then our whole cultural narrative as science and progress as the driving force between human endeavour, that starts to collapse and fall apart.
I'm part of a group we're some of the most highly published physicians in our specialty. Okay, so I'm not just a doctor who suddenly invented an opinion and is sharing it. And our opinion is that ivermectin is one of the most effective drugs in history in any disease model. And so that's a grand statement, but I truly believe it rivals the efficacy of penicillin in bacterial sepsis. And the reason why we say that, look at the states in India who have adopted and used ivermectin as part and parcel of an aggressive public health policy. They have done far better as far as controlling deaths, hospitalizations, and case counts.
The Madagascan miracle drink? An anti-coronavirus tea made from the plant Artemisia annua. The Madagascan president says it works.
I'm convinced that history will prove us right.
The herbal ingredient of the drink is medically proven to be effective against malaria. Now it's being distributed for free on the island against COVID-19 and shipped on bulk to other African countries. Is traditional medicine the answer? It's what many Africans turn to when the next clinic is far away.
Herbal treatments are not uncommon in Ghana. At this health facility in Achimota, all patients are treated only with herbal remedies.
But the World Health Organization is yet to prove the efficacy of the plant. Some doctors say untested herbal brews could be a risk rather than a remedy.
But there's heated debate on social media. Africans accuse the West of being condescending towards their faith in traditional medicines. How much faith do you personally put in traditional medicine, just in general?
A lot, because of its history. It has stood the test of times over many generations.
There have been worries in the European Union about its effectiveness and potential side effects. Germany initially restricted its use to under 65s. Now Berlin is recommending it purely for over 60s. Those worries were compounded by several cases of a rare thrombosis type following AstraZeneca vaccinations, some of them fatal. Britain's Medicines and Healthcare Regulator Agency says 20 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine had been administered by the end of March, with 79 cases of thrombosis later reported, 19 of which were fatal.
Stand in unison to fight this virus in every corner.
Human beings started out primitive and ignorant, helpless. But thanks to our big brains, we developed technology, and gradually we rose from a state of desperate survival struggle to our wonderful modern lives, where we have conquered the rest of nature and dominated other species and broken through one frontier after another. And our future in this myth is that someday we will not need nature at all.
My people have lived off the land for 40,000 years, and the bush is our natural pharmacy. My sister Egil learned all about bush medicines from our parents.
So immunity to natural infection is like something we learned on the first day of medical school, right? Like this is not mysterious. That's entirely how the immune system works. And so we expected that you would get immunity after natural infection. And now we have incredible data on that, which we can talk about. But it is amazing that immunity became politicized.
The virus has brought some calm to the A300 and the town. The clarity of your song is heard all around, and in these quieter days, the possibilities and the fears, we enter another age with the courage